today's webinar. We will be getting in just a few minutes here. We might be waiting for a few stragglers. So as we are waiting, it would be great if you all are able to put in the chat who you are and where you're calling in from today. And we'll get started in just a minute here. And a few housekeeping rules. We will be answering questions and we'll be including them in the discussion. If you'd like to, please go ahead and put any questions or any comments you have as we're going through and our panelists are answering these questions for you all into the chat. And we'd love to try to answer them. We'll answer as many as we can on the spot. We'll pull some of those questions live into the panelist discussion, and then others will follow up afterwards, any comments as we share this webinar. Thank you again so much for dialing in today. I see that we have folks coming in from all over the place, even globally. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much, no matter where you are. Hopefully you're staying safe and healthy and dealing with all of the fun new things we have to deal with in the world these days. Luckily, we do have a really great panel discussion scheduled, and the new normal, HyFlex and hybrid models for student engagement. That's us. That's what we'll be discussing today. So hope you brought your questions and comments for our panelists, and we'll be getting in just one moment. Okay, I have two passed. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again so much for calling in and dialing in today. My name is Edmund Breitling. I'm here with class. I'm on the partnerships team, and it's my job here at class to share some of the tools and engagement features we've added to Zoom, turning it into a fully engaging classroom environment that can be done synchronously and asynchronously. So again, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to go ahead and share a deck so that we are all on the same page. Okay. So this is us, and we are going to get right into it. So introductions, I'm going to introduce myself and our panelists. We are also going to dive into the actual panel discussions. We have some preloaded questions, and we'll also be pulling some from the chat if you happen to have those. And then lastly, we'll end with just a Q&A section. So all in all, we think we have an hour scheduled here. So let's get right into it. I'd love to introduce Dr. Enoch Hale and Dr. Jean Bailey with Humboldt State University and VCU Health. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, we'll start with Dr. Hale.
Hello, my name is Enoch Hale. I'm the director of our Center for Teaching and Learning and Academic Technology at Humboldt State University. Humboldt State is one of 23 campuses within the broader California State University system. And I think that just one piece I'd like to emphasize is that context matters. So the position of our university is such that for whether it's promotion and tenure or our strategic plans, our primary focus is on student success and teaching and learning as being a key component of that. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Bailey. I am the Associate Dean for Faculty Development in the School of Medicine at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. As you can see, we have a long history in the higher ed biz, as our starting date goes back to 1838. We are a very diverse campus, being an urban campus, and we're also a research-intensive or research-focused university. So our promotion and tenure guidelines are quite geared toward research and advancement in those areas, as well as then teaching and learning. So perhaps a little bit different bent from where Enoch is right now. So yeah, at VCU, it's a great place to be. Go Rams.
Great, thank you so much for those introductions. So as you can see, we've got some pretty knowledgeable folks on the line here to answer and discuss some of the questions we're talking about around hybrid and HyFlex conversations. Also, please, if you do have chats, or excuse me, questions or comments, put them in the chat. We've got some people that are monitoring that, so we can pull them up as we get going. We've got about 400 or so participants, and there's more adding every second. So put them in so we can pull them out to send to our panelists. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about class. This is our quick little plug as we're sponsoring the webinar and trying to make sure that we're talking about these big conversations. In my everyday, I talk to universities all day long, and I hear about some of the stresses and some of the things they're excited about in this new environment, right? This new online world, and how are we going to now transition back into the classroom? And so class, founded by Michael Chasen, the former founder of Blackboard, is built on top of Zoom. And what it does is it adds a whole bunch of engagement features, turning your entire online Zoom meeting into a fully functional, engaging environment. And so when Michael was setting this up, he said, you know, I don't want to be the expert here. I'm going to actually interview some faculty and staff and see what's going on and what they need. And so when we did, we found out that these are the biggest pieces that happen in a physical classroom, right? You have attendance and assignments and assessments. You do group presentations and one-on-one discussions. Maybe you'll browse the internet. You'll watch videos. You'll do grades and lecturing and whiteboarding. You'll do some general questions and some breakout groups. Well, all of that is really great that happens in a physical classroom, but online, a lot of that is missing. You can't do a whole lot. There's a lot of workarounds, but at the end of the day, this is kind of what you're left with. So we created a tool that really includes all of those missing features: the teaching tools, student engagement tracking, attendance and ID verification, proctored exams, seating charts, and classroom management tools. So really quickly at a high level, I want to show you, this is what it looks like. So imagine your Zoom tool, right? Transition to this. The instructor is always in the top left corner in the podium. We added tabs, so no matter how many resources you have open, you can quickly toggle within our class app. You can have all of your remote students down here and your students that are physically in class, and a much larger view at the top. We've added 4 main buttons to manage your students. You can see exactly what's going on with each of your students, even if you're not looking at their tiles. We also added enhancements to the breakout rooms. So when you click in your breakout rooms, you can see all of your breakout rooms listed out here. You can see all of your students in each breakout room. You can see who's talking in each breakout room. You can join each breakout room. You can also launch assignments and assessments and different resources and videos and whatever you want to specific rooms or to all of your rooms. Maybe you want one breakout room to take an assessment, and you want another breakout room to watch a video, and you watch another one, browse the web. They can do all of that when you're in breakout rooms. We also have this feature called the proctored exam view. You can see all of your students on the left, all of their shared screens on the right. If they have multiple screens, you'll see all of them. They're low-res images. It's not going to slow down your bandwidth. What's cool about this is you can turn this on at any point. It doesn't have to be the proctor exam. Just like the old days when you'd walk up and down the rows of your students, seeing what everybody's working on. Now you can do that in this environment. You can have a one-on-one discussion with that student to say, hey, what's going on? What can I do? What can I help you out with? In a video environment. The rest of the class won't see you. It's really a very cool tool. So right now we're currently adding new schools every day. So if you are interested, please let us know. Otherwise, we're happy to support this conversation around hybrid and HyFlex and be a tool in your bag of tools as we go back to full-time in-person and remote. So with that, let's get right into the discussion here, the new normal. So some stats just to kind of provoke some thoughts here. Students and faculty expectations, right? Demand for flexibility is high. 73% of students want to take some fully online courses in the future. 74% of Duke employees want to continue to work in some sort of remote or hybrid facet, right? So these are the type of stats where before, years ago it was, oh yeah, I don't want to take online. And now that's where we're at. So I wanted to take this time right now. What opportunities are there for university to capitalize on hybrid education offering? Enoch or Jean, do you all want to take a stab at this?
Well, I think the question that comes to that I'm reflecting on right now is that concept of opportunity. I think context matters, and words matter. I mean, I'm sure there's many of us in this meeting today who would really just say, I want a very exact definition of HyFlex, distinguishing it from hybrid. And that's very important when you're thinking of like course calendars, when you're thinking of students enrolling for classes. And so there's also the reality of its applications. And I think that opportunity is seized, I think identified, it's actualized even better. It's like operationalized when we have a clear idea of what is our end goal. If our end goal, for example, is to maximize the different modalities by which students can engage in any particular class, then following out the implications of that, it's really going to think, okay, what are my communications, what are my technology, and what are the development and training? And those are like three foundational elements that I think cannot be neglected. Those are three elements upon which I personally want to anchor my thinking, because the communication just isn't about like, hey, we're going to be doing this thing. It's about calibrating expectations. And we just like students are coming into a class with all kinds of different assumptions about what teaching is, what learning is, about how technology is going to be used, about their responsibilities or lack thereof. Similarly, faculty are coming in, and so with expectations and assumptions about those things. So how do we best align those, particularly with the vision that the university is trying to move forward? So opportunity is an interesting concept because I think it begs deep attention in order to really like take advantage of it. Jean, what do you think?
You touched on something that I actually just wrote we call them med ed pearls in the medical ed arena, but and we post them on a nationwide listserv. But my post that I did was on an article in the Harvard, I believe it was the Education Journal, where the authors talked about a framework for returning to campus with intention. And I think that's what we have to think of is, how are we going to use these tools, or how are we going to proceed intentionally? And some of there was a framework that they outlined in that article, but they talked about, what are some of the visual cues or the structures perhaps that we have that just cause us to do a knee jerk and go back to the ways we were. So can we step back and examine some of those and look at intentionality with what we're doing and how we want to move forward? Because this is an incredibly ripe time for higher ed to really take advantage of opportunities and to make some changes and to perhaps move away from what we have always done and start to do something that's different. So I agree. This is just a really good opportunity to rethink things that we've been doing for so long.
So if I'm thinking of the question, how can we think of HyFlex as a new way of conceptualizing and organizing teaching and learning in higher ed? My first thought goes to this brilliant thought experiment at Stanford University called Stanford 2025. You can just Google that. And particularly their concept of an open loop university. And it was a thought experiment saying, what if we stop thinking of students as, 4 years, and then they go on, they leave, but thinking of students as lifelong Stanford students, where they're moving in and out of different ways of engaging, whether it's online, through internships and face-to-face classes. And so the idea there is, if we can think of like HyFlex instruction as a dynamic concept, and then find ways to actualize that so that the learning goals are moving forward, so our professional goals are moving forward, then I think we have a lot more options. It makes me think of like, no metaphor is perfect, so bear with me here, but I think of it almost as like HyFlex is like carbon fiber. It's strong, it's flexible, it's multifunctional. And so that I'm wondering, like, what is it that makes the new normal? What are our foundational elements, that we can build that strong, flexible, multifunctional? I think the technology, the pedagogy is a consequence of the learning and the thinking that we want to see, right? And all too often we flip that. Oh, I'm going to add this tool and it's going to give me the learning I want to see. I'm going to add this tip, this little pedagogical trick, and students are going to magically have the insight. I really am focused, like, if we can just really think about HyFlex learning, its dynamic applications, are actualized when we say, yeah, we're going to really build off the science of learning. We are going to embrace like backward design and UDL, and we're going to really see how equity, deep intellectual engagement, and with evidence-informed, evidence-based practices, we're then just limited by our imaginations. I realize that sounds awfully lofty, but when I'm thinking about the new normal, I think the tools and its applications, the course calendars, promotion and tenure, all of these things, I think can be much more, they can be well positioned to actually take advantage of what Edmund mentioned earlier, is like, what is an opportunity?
And I'm with you on that 100%. And I wanted to just quickly draw everyone's attention to what we have that's being displayed, where, you know, HyFlex versus hybrid versus face-to-face, right? So in a HyFlex environment, students have the options and to go to class or to, you know, decide to stay home or go to a coffee shop or whatever it is and take that class. Whereas, you know, in an asynchronous, maybe it's just completely, you know, you don't have to be there face-to-face versus face-to-face, right in front of your teacher, you know, reach out and touch your teacher. So as we evolve into seeing what's going to be the best modality for education, maybe there isn't one, maybe it's, you know, it's up to each reference point, each person's experience and what, you know, is going to work for them. But having the options, I think that is key to moving forward. And so as we discussed that, Dr. Brian Beatty, the author of the Hybrid Flexible Course Design, said the result is a student-directed multi-model learning experience. And that sounds like a whole lot of words because it is a really big topic, right? So much so that we have this whole discussion today about it. And that's really where we're going to kick off from here. Is I want to get into some really great panel discussions. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the first features here. So Enoch, I'm going to hand it to you. Student engagement. What needs to be done to make HyFlex instruction and student life deeply engaging?
I'm happy to frame that as like deeply. So I'm also happy you referenced Dr. B's work, because the thing, choice, it's about choice, right? But choice is an interesting concept in the sense like it assumes I want it. It assumes that I understand the options. It assumes that I understand the commitment, as you know, and how to manifest that choice. And I think what needs to be done, the first thing I think ultimately that needs to be done is we have to really help students and faculty. I'll just keep it there for now. Really understand like what choice means. What does it mean to be engaging? What does the thinking look like in this classroom? And then begin to move forward from there. So really aligning those expectations. What does it mean to be a quality online student? What does it mean to engage in in-class discussion where I'm listening critically, where I'm contributing critically? I think those are very foundational elements, but we can't neglect the infrastructure. I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm going to have students in my class and students zooming in, and the technology isn't there to allow that, then we run the risk of, say, students zooming into that classroom as being treated as like second-class citizens or worse, not even there. So having a dynamic interface where faculty understand how to move that, those learning expectations forward, I think is a really important consideration.
Yeah, I
go on, but Gene.
So I was going to add also, you know, when we think of our new way to be, our new normal per se, and, you know, ways that comparing that to ways that we've done things in the past, maybe we need to rethink our model. Like, you know, teaching now is definitely, there's an opportunity for it to become a team sport, and not only with other teachers, but perhaps with different levels of support than we've used before. You know, maybe now your instructional designer is your key guide on the side, where perhaps in the past you've always gone solo, or perhaps your instructional technologist is a part of the team that helps you implement some of your strategies for teaching that you're designing with this help. So I think there's opportunity to revisit or rethink how we are in the classroom, and it might not be, the solo performance that we've always had in higher ed, but maybe now it's a team sport, and we have, an interprofessional approach to learning that happens in the classroom. So that's going to mean different, funneling funds in a different way, perhaps, looking at how we structure things. Maybe we don't have a consistent course schedule anymore. We could really blow this up and have this be a learning anywhere, anytime kind of thing when you're ready, whether that's in the fall semester or, in December. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to really, really tear down some of those cement walls that we've always had, and rebuild in a different way.
And I'm seeing the Q&A here, and I'd like to add. I really want to ask this question of both of you. I know we have this third question here, but the question is, how do you truly avoid the roomers versus Zoomers mentality? I have never heard that, but I am 100% going to use that moving forward. And I'd love to hear from you both on what are your thoughts. Jean, why don't you kick us off? How do you avoid the roomers versus Zoomers?
So I guess I don't know what they mean by the rumors. Is that?
Yeah, the way that I'm interpreting that is, the people that are physically in class versus the people that are on Zoom.
Yeah, so the us versus them, good. Yeah, how do you avoid that? And I think it's human nature, right, to interact with the people that are right there. So there's more of an intentionality that has to happen when you're teaching, and an awareness of the Zoomers out there. And again, maybe this is where you're having that team when you teach, so that we're all together and people are helping to field questions and make sure that everyone is heard. So I think that's a really good question, and I'm not exactly sure how to engage people unless maybe there are opportunities, using tools like class for the people in the class to engage with the Zoomers, so that you bring people together in a different way. And it's not just them and, us and them, but it's all of us together. So that might be an option. Enoch, do you have ideas?
Well, I'll start with a quick anecdote. Like, this is fascinating instructional context. I mean, particularly if you're like taking HyFlex to like the extreme, in which students can choose to attend any time they want, like however they want. They can choose to say, I'm going to go synchronously this time, but next time I'm going to do my work asynchronously. That poses an incredible workload, design load for educators, right? Not to mention helping students understand their roles and responsibilities within it. And that's how I'd answer this question. I'm a big advocate in terms of, if I want to see it, I have to teach it. So if I want students to engage with one another, say in discussion, then one, I have to be very clear about my learning outcome, and then design to that end and really help. I don't want to leave a lot up to hope. I think, and what I mean by that is, I would love to have a class, and I've had them many times, where the discussion is super organic and, everybody's engaged. But at the end of the day, I mean, reality is, the majority of the time I'll have in a lecture, 5 students engaged out of 50, and that's a reality. And I think that paradigm manifests itself in the roomers versus Zoomer context. And so design accordingly. I could say, okay, right now we're going to take 3 minutes. You're going to ask a question in the chat on Zoom. You have your computers out there. There's going to be one person designated. I mean, there's many ways we can do it, but it has to be intentional. People will be, it doesn't matter if they're in the physical space together or they're in both, digital and physical. People will be marginalized and accept that, right?
Yeah.
Unless they are positioned to directly engage and helping them understand how to engage, right? I think that's
yeah, and it actually brings us to one of the questions I saw that was in the Q&A and also on here is, you try to design this classroom that's going to be engaging, but at the end of the day, that student has to commit to the class as well. So what, in your eyes, are the responsibilities of these online learners in the HyFlex modality? If I know that I'm going to be physically in class and my classmates are going to be online at the same time, or if I'm going to be online and other students are going to be physically in class, what are my responsibilities as a student? Like, what impetus of the learning is on me?
Gene, you're in a much different context than I am. Like, please have that.
So, well, I was thinking about some of the teaching and learning models that are very common. And, so how are you motivating your students to participate anyway? And so if we go back and revisit some of those models, and I thought of a few today, like John Keller's ARCS model, how are you grabbing people's attention? How are you making the material relevant? How are you encouraging students' confidence, or also making sure that the students feel good about, are satisfied at the end, and they feel good about what they've learned and making connections with the material. So, some simple things like that. Are you using these already in your classes? So what does this look like in that online environment? And then again, how can you dovetail the Zoomers with the Roomers in these processes that you're using? So some of those things also, as I think about the make it stick principles or the neuroscience of learning, are you implementing some of those things so the students feel like, wow, I really am learning in here? Are you using, retrieval practice or spaced repetition or interleaving to help the students to foster their learning? So if they can see that there's that this is impacting them, their learning is really changing over time, and you can provide them with some tools wherever they are to see that they're making progress, then you're going to engage them and know that it's perhaps worth their time. Enoch, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to go back. If you want to see it, you got to teach it. So my context is much different. And I don't want to assume that when I ask students to say, or give them a task, say, I want you to ask questions about the reading, that they know how to ask questions. That they know the different types of questions and the different frames of organizing questions. I don't want to assume that when I say, hey, get in a think, pair, share in a small group of 3 and talk about this thing, or solve this problem, that they know how to listen critically, how to self-organize, how to stay on task. Those are things I think need to be, in my context, explicitly instructed. And I think doing a few things well rather than many things poorly can really help manage the workload. But I don't want to neglect the other element of this as well. There's like an enormous amount of responsibility put on faculty to figure out how to teach the disciplinary content in dynamic modalities like HyFlex and teach students how to study and learn. That's how to college, for that matter. That's a lot. In some contexts, those assumptions are a little bit more safe. In others, not so much. So to that point of like engaging students, I think less is more. Do a few things really well. I really like some of the work that like coming out of Ron Richard at Harvard with Project Zero and just thinking routines. Identify the thinking goal, and then have students regular practice in dynamic ways, the read, write, speak, listen. But with that said too, I don't want to also sidestep the fact that there's emotional consequences with faculty when those things aren't realized. So you're sitting in a classroom and you have 30 students and one student's Zoom is on. That's another way to think of like the Zoomer and the Roomer. Someone's just sitting there with black screens, and that has an emotional consequence. And so I think the better we can map out all of these dynamics, we're able to see the highly interconnected elements of this, and then be able to utilize, I want to say de-silo, but utilize our resources across campus to better engage. And that's one of the strategies we're working with here at our university, is like, how do you have information technology, the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Learning Center, student affairs all together to resource all of us thinking of education, like resource our educators to help educate our students. And I'm starting to stumble over my words, but I think the point here is keep it simple. You got it. If you got to see it, if you want to see it, you got to teach it. That's my goal.
So that's the way it is to, get the students engaged. But Jean, I love your thoughts on this, and if you want to carry on that, but I want to sort of shift it a little bit to, the questions we have up here, and what can institutions do to support faculty taking on HyFlex and hybrid courses?
So I think we, covered a little bit of this about revisiting the way we support faculty in their teaching and the student learning. So, talking about that team approach perhaps, or, changing things up so that teaching is no longer that solo practice that we've known for so long. One of the things I was also thinking about when I was listening to Enoch's talk is the fact that, HyFlex has come out really at a time when we were all doing that pivot to online education. And so there was a lot going on. We're experiencing a pandemic, for goodness sakes, and having to make quick decisions and quick shifting of the ways we're teaching. And that's very difficult for people to do, even if they weren't, if they knew what they were, had a model, I should say, that they could quickly jump on. But a lot of people didn't. A lot of people in their classes have never gone into that online learning arena yet. So we have these new modalities that are coming up that are daunting when you especially add them on top of having to make that big shift for so many people. And what we need to remind ourselves is, I teach a curriculum design course, and we talk about curriculum design as an iterative process. We're constantly remaking what we do, or at least, faculty who are really engaged in what they're doing are constantly revisiting their curriculum and taking notes after a session and being reflective practitioners and changing things up perhaps for the next time. So how do we change things up now with these tools? So we've done it, we've gone online, we've done a virtual experience so far. How do we keep working on it to make it better, incorporating some of these other tools? If we're going HyFlex, then how can we continue to revisit and make it better? So that's where the heavy lifting has to be right now. And that's where we need the support, where faculty are going to need to, have people come together, revisit the structure of their course, the design of their course, perhaps even looking, as Enoch said, to the learning outcomes and, making sure we're teaching to those, making sure we're providing some instructional strategies that can help pull the material together and help the students experience the material and learn from those strategies, but also incorporating these tools like HyFlex and class.com applications to bring it all together for us. So I think that's the key, is really seeing that need for extra support at this point, because like everyone, the faculty are really, really tired. So it's really crucial right now that we are attentive to that.
So that brings me,
sorry.
Really quickly, just we have a question in the chat around this, and I know you kind of touched on it, but Enoch, if you or Jean, either of you, the question is, how can we do HyFlex without doubling or tripling workload, prep, setup time, classroom management for our faculty?
Okay. That's a really complex question. It's, I don't think there's a simple answer, but so I'll come around back to that, I think. And the idea is, what can institutions do to support faculty taking on this? I think your question there is like, that's a major consideration. We're not asking people to do more, right? And I think that's an important conceptual shift. So what I'm thinking is like, how clear are the pathways for faculty to develop as educators who can teach within multiple modalities, HyFlex being one of them? So to what extent are they aware of what's available to help their development in that? So there's centers, for teaching and learning, for example, that provide mid-semester feedback, that have book groups, faculty learning communities, have course design or transformation institutes. But there's also the need to provide ongoing training for faculty to get in the classrooms and touch the buttons. So we don't want logistical hiccups that to interrupt the learning goals. And that actually is an important element when you're thinking of workload as well. I think we also have to have faculty examples. And our work here at my university in the last 2 years, well, 2 summers, we funded summer deeply immersive experience and reconceptualizing and designing their courses for a HyFlex context, right? And that as a result has resulted in over 200 faculty examples, artifacts of pedagogy, of assignments, of activities, of syllabi, liquid syllabi, of humanizing approaches, some that focus on equity, some that focuses on different types of engagement. And those become a pedagogical warehouse that faculty can consult to see alternative ways of doing things. So, and also investing in the tech. I think that's an important piece. Not a lot of tools, but doing a few tools really, really well. So I think that workload increases when I'm trying to take an old paradigm and force it into a new operating system, right? But if I can have the institutional support to fund completely rethinking the course for that new operating system, I think workload shifts. I'm not going to say it's less, but we begin to think about, we might think about grading differently. At our university, we have a few faculty that have really embraced, like we could call it contract grading. Some would call it contract grading, where I was a big advocate in my teaching about random sample grading. Like grading can take a lot of that time. Managing that takes a lot of time. But really, at the end of the day, what's the purpose of that, of my grading mechanisms, and to what extent have I inherited those based upon my own education? I think that's an important piece. We've inherited pedagogy as faculty. We've inherited grading systems. We've inherited how to study. We've inherited course structures. And so if you want the workload to increase, keep that inheritance. If you want it to shift, rethink some of those assumptions upon which our entire way of teaching and learning has been built.
I'd like to add to that too, such great information, and it sounds like your institution's doing some wonderful things. So in addition to all that Enoch just said, what about considering all of these new things that you've done as part of your scholarship, so that you're getting kind of a double whammy? Even, Enoch said they're creating all of these different processes perhaps, and syllabi and different things. So roll that into your scholarship. And as well, institutions need to think about all of this work as part of the P&T process, and to value the work that's gone into recreating or revitalizing courses, or flipping to the online or hybrid HyFlex modality. So those things should be valued in those processes as well. So just to add on to what Enoch says, there are scholarship and P&T opportunities here that we need to really be thinking about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Let's, I'd love to talk about this next thing here, this next question, Jean. How has the transition to virtual training impacted faculty development?
So thanks for that. Actually, in the medical ed field, we have found, and I would assume that this is parallel in the university in general, in the teaching and learning centers, and hopefully Enoch can attest to that, but we have seen increased participation in faculty development programming, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were at a loss for community, at a loss for going to conferences that they were always used to attending, and just missing those learning opportunities that they so often took advantage of. So we saw increased numbers. We still offer all of our faculty development offerings or sessions online for now, especially as things maybe turn back to the way we knew them at the beginning of the pandemic. We'll see. But so we're offering a lot of most of our things online, and we're still seeing that increased participation, as well as we're looking at how we offer faculty development to make sure that they're not just passive lectures that people log into and sit back and grocery shop or shop for shoes or whatever we always say folks are doing when they're not attentive to what's going on. But we build in engagement and active learning opportunities in these faculty development sessions. So we're really intentional about that. I keep thinking about the word intentional coming up. So that's one of the ways faculty development has changed. In a busy medical campus like ours, having things online allows us to, one, bring in experts from all over the world, basically, to present a session at a much cheaper rate because we're not paying for travel. It allows people to attend in their offices instead of traveling across campus or from a clinical site in the community into campus to attend. So it's been more convenient for folks. So just a lot of benefits for faculty development in this realm, but also, the focus of a lot of the activities that we offer has shifted to supporting online learners. So those are a couple of things that come to mind. Enoch, I don't know if you have some ideas as well.
Well, I don't want to reiterate or restate what you said because it's dead on. I'll just add a couple other considerations for sure. I saw a comment in chat pop up and can't wait to get, I just want to go back to face-to-face. I will fully admit in my own teaching, I thrive in a face-to-face. I mean, I've studied it, it's my jam. And so that learning to be and teaching an online class over the summers, I need to study it. And I think that's one of the biggest implications for faculty development. Because if we say training, I have to ask the question, what's the difference between training and a workshop? What's the difference between training, a workshop, and say a seminar, right? Or maybe just a little orientation. What's that versus a presentation? All these have implications when we package everything within one term. And that term, I think, positions faculty going into their faculty development pieces just in certain ways. So how it's impacted our campus in part is we've been much more exact in what faculty are going to be doing. So just as we want to orient students to what's happening in the classroom, so too orienting faculty, this is what to expect and the type of work you're going to be engaged in. If we're just going to talk, all right, then we're going to have some Q&A, maybe a follow-up. But if you're going to train, then I want you to develop skill. And that has been a big impact in terms of faculty development. We've been able to differentiate the types of work that faculty are doing. I think, moreover, it's really engaged us heavily within, Gene, you mentioned earlier about the scholarship, the teaching and learning, heavily into you can study, and it's rewarded on my campus, so you can study your work. And let's lay out a teaching development plan for 3 years. How do I want to develop as an educator 3 years from now? So I don't feel like I have to do everything at once, but pick one thing within this HyFlex context that you're going to really try to master. And that's been another focus, is it's made it emotionally manageable, because a lot of faculty are coming in and admittedly saying, I just need to get this course up and running. I just got to get these get my Canvas in order, get my Blackboard in order. I just got to get these assignments loaded. And that's fine. That's very pragmatic. But HyFlex is something much more complex. And I think that it's allowed us to really open up conversations with retention and promotion portfolios, I should say tenure and files. It's opened up communications with our collective bargaining units. It's opened up communications with student affairs. I think all of a sudden faculty development has become a much more rich, highly interconnected environment.
And so along those lines, I know there's some questions in the chat about it. And our next slide I want to discuss is around equity, right? So we're in this new world of technology, and there's a question here in the chat around how do we ensure equitable experiences for those asynchronous learners, the Roomers and the Zoomers? How can we engage in live activities, but a different approach? What do we need to use for those participating in asynchronously versus what seems to be a necessity in a different activity? So as we move forward, technology is everybody has that. And you can see right here, 68% of Black respondents felt positive about online learning. 60% of Hispanic respondents rated online learning positively. I'd love to hear from Eugene on, what your thoughts on are around how we can make this as equitable as possible. What tactics can a faculty member in the classroom use to make sure that their students who are coming from different places and being able to be physical and remote, how can they have that as close to a similar experience as possible?
So this makes me think of some of the new features that I've heard coming out on Zoom, where the students can just have their screen shown to the instructor and not the rest of the class. When we hear about students not sharing their screens or not turning their cameras on because they're concerned about what's in the background or different personal things going on in the past. Using some of those tools and some of those features might help folks who otherwise don't feel safe showing their screens. That might create some equity for students who might not otherwise feel that they can show up. And I'm also thinking about the fact that the online learning, if we step away from some of the diversity, the diversity of learners and how we learn. So you think of somebody who's introverted, who needs a little bit more time. They now have a chat feature that they can use and type something in and compose their thoughts in a different way than they might if they were sitting in a class. So, so perhaps some of the ways that students can engage online feel safer for folks who might otherwise feel like they can't speak up in a situation. So that's one of the first things that comes to mind, I guess, is thinking of, ways we can shift this so that people can be seen when they want to be seen, but also contribute in different ways that allow them to compile their thoughts or compose their thoughts in a different way than if they were in a face-to-face situation. And Enoch, I'm sure you have something to add to that.
Yeah, my first thought comes like pacing. Like how, on a typical day of class, how are we organizing that to give students enough time so that we can properly differentiate and maximize opportunities for every student to advance their learning? I mean, when they're thinking, that's my first thought. But if I took it made me think of a question as you were talking, Gene, about like, okay, what do we know about equity and its applications, its manifestations in my class? So CSU put out this amazing, what they call student success dashboards. And you can look at, according to how the US government defines it, underrepresented minoritized students like status, whether it's like in your class and the student success ratios, for your department, for your college, for like the history of that class. So you could look at, gender, you can look at racial, you can look at, Pell status, and those dashboards help you give a frame like, okay, this is what I should expect in my class. HSU is now a Hispanic serving institution. That was a major shift in the population that this university historically served. Similarly, what we did is we said, okay, building off of this grant in our College of Natural Resources and Sciences, who joined with Scala, which is an organization out of New Mexico that really focuses on how do you become an HSI thriving institution. We created a equity index ratio report. So now you can reach out to our institutional research and say, okay, is there an equity gap in my class? And then, using that as Scala model, then we can work with faculty to study, to observe their own instruction, and then make adjustments. And like in one case, one faculty member said, well, everyone's succeeding in terms of like their passing class, but there's more white men getting, A's than non-white men. And they said, well, what's the problem? And they found just by observing themselves that they're spending more time answering questions from those white students than they were others. So she did two things. She just equalized her times across groups, and she taught students how to ask questions because she found the white students are asking more questions. And then the grades normalized. So to the point about equity, my big question here is like, what do you know? What data do you have that can help point you to some actions? And we're thinking that within the HyFlex context, I think it also goes back to helping students understand what it means to be an engaged learner and part of their responsibility and what it means to study and really laying that out for them so that when they come to class, the communication between the two of you and its implications for the classroom are like understood.
Absolutely. And Jean, I'd love to hear, depending on your role, faculty, dean, or student, how can you advocate for HyFlex opportunities within your campus?
So I think as I consider that question a little bit, advocating for HyFlex, you know, I think a lot of this has to happen, you know, from maybe student demand coming up through the ranks, because the students are who we should be serving. And if we see, you know, as your stats showed at the beginning, that there's an increasing demand for HyFlex opportunities or learning options for students, then that's what should be driving change at the institutional level. And so, you know, I think that change should then filter up through faculty and to the deans or the leaders for that support that we've been talking about throughout this conversation. You know, so how do we go after what the students want and help support that? Again, using that word with intention, with purpose, looking at design, looking at all of these things that have been part of this conversation already. So I think that's what has to happen, is we have to have people who are willing to take some risk and try some new things, and have a safe culture in our institutions for people to take those chances and try something new and see where it goes. So I guess, you know, letting things be student driven is, you know, how we should be as educators anyway.
Absolutely. Thank you for that response. I appreciate that. And then Enoch, I'd love to hear how is HyFlex actualized when a physical location makes infrastructure stability unpredictable?
Yeah, that's the question. That's the question I'm like in right now. And so infrastructure, you know, the lack of predictability. One of the things in our area is we're remote. We're the most northernmost campus in the CSU system. We serve Northern California, the very northern part of that. And right now we got, okay, a pandemic that disrupted things. All right. Fires, California's burning, right? That disrupts us in the sense that, like, roads closed. So a lot of students may not be able to make it to class. We got 2 main roads closed and there's 3 that get us into the area right now. There's no like train or bus, you know, it's difficult for students to get up here. Power outages are like an ongoing problem. And so what we're trying to like really understand about, say, HyFlex is really, when I go back to my original opening comments about, if we think of HyFlex as a highly dynamic, ongoing, the new normal is being flexible, then I can design my instruction to that. So if I can just say, yeah, there's going to be fires, there might be a tsunami, there's definitely going to be earthquakes, then I'm able to communicate to my students that learning is not stopping if the power goes out. Rather, here's this bucket of work, you know, that we have that park it in Canvas. You know, we had internet go out. Well, if internet goes out, students understand, okay, this week I've got to do the following things. I got a book, this project, whatever it is. I think it's really now about HyFlex, dynamically conceived, is bigger than just students bisynchronously joining a classroom session. It's having multiple ways to move the learning outcome forward. If someone's sick, like an instructor's sick, the learning doesn't stop. And I think the biggest part of that is helping shift student understanding that, yeah, it's about the learning. Learning is developing my intellect within this field, right? It's about developing the dispositions. It's about developing the content insights and skills. It's not doing what the teacher says, right? So that's helping students understand that, I think, makes a dynamic concept of flexible instruction like happen, because learning will continue despite the disruptions.
Gene, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
So I like Enoch's idea of learning doesn't stop. And I think it's, if you have students who are motivated to learn and you've set up an environment that fosters that motivation, then the rest should fall into place for you. And again, when he talked about the flexibility, I think that's another piece that we have to, as instructors, think about. I think in the past, higher ed's been pretty rigid. You have this due date, you have to learn, and this parameter from this time to that time, there's a start date and a stop date, all of that, these constraints that we put on learning. But if we think about that flexibility and bringing maybe a little bit more compassion into the learning environment so the students feel supported, then we might have different results and students who are very, very willing to take that responsibility for their learning that they need to. So I guess that's what I was thinking as Enoch was talking. Thank you.
Great. And I know we just have a few more minutes here. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It seems like enjoy is an interesting word to use since it's stressful at this point. I know a lot of faculty and staff are feeling anxious about it. In fact, we actually have a poll. If we can launch that poll, I know that'll go out to everybody, and we can get those answers before we dive in. It should be popped up at this point. But as we move forward, what is your school planning to do? Enoch and Gene, I'd love to hear with the last few minutes we have here, closing thoughts on where we're at, give you like a minute each. And then I know there was a lot of questions we didn't get to, but we will get to you. We'll follow up with those answers if you put it in the Q&A. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat as well. We'll try to do our best to follow up with you there also. So if you have to drop off, thank you so much for coming. But at this point, closing thoughts, I'd love to hear from you both.
We're embracing a concept of learning continues in the face of constant disruption. We're really embracing a concept of like flexible learning. You'd call it HumFlex. It's kind of humble. And we see this concept popping up at a lot of universities, particularly in the CSU. And that is going to be I think our new norm, is really helping faculty and students understand and follow out the implications and all of its highly interconnected ways, from promotion and tenure through our bigger student success goals to down and dirty in the classroom. So that's what we are embracing. The future is flexible.
Thank you.
And I'll tag on to Enoch and say, now is the time. Now is the time for change. This is a ripe opportunity that we have to make those changes, to implement some of these new tools, to really rethink what we do in higher education in all facets, in the classroom, in our scholarship, perhaps, or promotion and tenure, the tools that we're using, the ways we use our facilities, all of those things come together. And it's really time to step back, look at things, and rethink how we've done higher ed and move forward in new ways. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so I want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. I think that everybody on this webinar has really appreciated the thoughts and the discussion. The questions from the participants were fantastic. Again, we will get back to you on those questions that weren't answered. If you're looking for more information on class, I would encourage you to reach out to us. We're at class.com. I'd love to show you and give you a demo on the various features we're going to be that we have that are available for your hybrid learning. And thank you so much for your time today. I hope you all had a fantastic time with our panelists. I know that on our end, I thought we had a lot of fun. So
great. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming.
All right, thank you, Edmund. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.